Obsession. A true story. The unfolding of a very complex process of obsession, with its main roots planted deep in the mysterious soil of past incarnations, with many implications projected into the future of those involved. Hello and welcome to another episode of Obsession. Today we'll be reading and discussing Chapter 5, which is entitled Spirit Help. To begin our reading and discussion today, we'd like to say a brief prayer to open the space so that the good spirits will be with us. Thank you, Jesus, for the gift of your model of what it is to be a good person in this world. We would like to begin our reading and discussion today, remembering the good deeds you've done on earth and the way in which you taught us to use the power of our thoughts for good purposes, to make sure that our actions match with our desires, that we're always thinking about how our actions and thoughts impact others, and that we think about the ways in which we can become ever more so loving, ever more so compassionate, ever more so giving, and how we can look upon our lives on this earth as an opportunity for self-growth and self-discovery of ourselves as loving, kind, compassionate, giving, and ever more so charitable spirits. Thank you, God. Thank you, mentors. And so be it. Let's begin the reading of Chapter 5. Chapter 5, Spirit Help. We erroneously imagine that the actions of spirits can only be manifested by extraordinary phenomena. We would have spirits come to our aid by means of miracles, and we imagine them to be always armed with a sort of magic wand. Such is not the case, all that is done through their help being accomplished by natural means. Their intervention usually takes place without our being aware of it. Thus, for instance, they bring about the meeting of two persons who seem to have been brought together by chance. They suggest to the mind of someone the idea of going in a particular direction. They call your attention to some special point if the action of your part thus led up to by their suggestion, unperceived by you, will bring about the result they seek to obtain. In this way, each man supposes himself to be obeying only his own impulse, and thus always preserves the freedom of his will. Spirit's Book, number 525, Kardec's Commentary. At her birthday party, Esther had been surprised by the ruthless aggression of a rebellious earthbound entity dominated by violent hatred, who had found in her mediumistic sensibility the necessary conditions for possession. Taking her over in an incidental circumstance, the obsessor gradually consolidated his position as controller of her mental world, subjugating her completely to his will. As a spirit indebted to divine laws, Esther had built into herself the appropriate conditions for a perfect attunement with the invading entity, so contributing to aggravate the problem. In the same nursing home where she was now atoning for the errors of her past incarnations, many other patients were also victims of obsession. Their conditions were, of course, at variance with the classical view of insanity, which considers the sick person as someone who tries to evade the realities of his environment through unconscious suicide. Usually when insanity breaks out, Obsession also comes into the picture because of the link that keeps both incarnate and discarnate people connected through the records of an invisible divine ledger, where common failures and serious debts are to be balanced by the law of cause and effect. Madness that develops as a consequence of obsession often becomes irreversible because of the constant magnetic pressure on the victim's mental field of energy. Under the strain of such disaggregating forces, a general imbalance is developed affecting the nervous stability, the metabolism, and even the physical body itself through the disorganization of the cells which have become deteriorated in the process. Any treatment in such cases should be guided not only by academic methods of conventional medicine, but also into taking into consideration the spiritual connotations involved. In the specific case of Esther, many aggravating karmic elements were present. However, as nobody is ever abandoned by divine mercy, Rosangela, the young nurse, was to become the instrument of higher spirit beings in their attempt to help the poor girl more effectively. In spite of her use, Rosangela was a mature person. Since early childhood, she had to face many difficulties. In fighting and overcoming them, she had reached a state of inner harmony. Her mother had died when she was 8 years old, leaving her to the care of her father. In a poor house in one of the many suburbs of Rio, father and daughter fought their way through bravely. Having a gentle and pleasant disposition, Rosangela made many friends amongst her neighbors. They took care of her while her father was out working. They sent her to a nearby school so that they could watch over her. A few years after her mother's death, her father married again. His new wife, however, disliked the girl and became her great enemy. The situation became unbearable, and the girl was forced to leave the house and work as a nursemaid for a family in Botafogo, a fashionable residential district of Rio. There she proved to be a very responsible person, and in time her dedication won her the affection of her employers, who decided to help her when they heard her story. Soon she was no longer considered as a servant, but one of the family. True Spiritists, the family that had housed her, taught her the principles of their doctrine. They sent her to night classes where she finished high school. After that, she went to a special school where she was trained as a nurse's aide. Now she was working at the hospital where Esther had been confined. When the gift of mediumship was revealed in the young nurse, she was directed to a Spiritist group where she developed herself into a conscious medium, dedicating herself to spirit rescue work, helping perturbed discarnate entities to find their way in the spirit world. On meeting Esther, she felt all the elements of tragedy behind the disordered, painful exteriorization of impulses of the young patient. Rosangela sympathized with the tormented child at first sight, and from that moment on she started praying for her. Under the inspiration of her spirit guides and those of Esther's, the nurse began to approach the girl tactfully until she succeeded in calming her down with her simple presence. This way she made it possible for Esther to be taken out of the straitjacket, for the girl was constantly kept in one, except only when under heavy doses of sedatives. Rosangela began to devote all her free time to Esther, although the girl did not always receive her amiably or show any signs of lucidity. However, Rosangela's vibrations were able to neutralize the obsessor's aggressiveness, for the entity could not help submitting to the nurse's moral superiority. Examining the patient's case history and obtaining other personal information through discreet inquiries, she became acquainted with the young girl's drama. Impressed by the peculiar characteristics the case presented, she decided to talk it over with the Albuquerques, the family whom she lived with, seeking advice to carry on a project she had in mind, namely, to visit the girl's parents and explain to them what she thought were the real causes of the singular disease. She hoped to be able to help, as the gospel commands her to do. A telephone appointment was made with Colonel Santa Maria and his wife. On a sunny September morning, she arrived at their apartment, a place where happiness had once dwelt, but was now a sad seat of bitterness and painful memories.
Rosangela's spirit friends helped her to overcome the natural timidity and embarrassment. She was not badly received, but she noticed a shadow of displeasure on her hosts' faces. She felt uncomfortable under the scrutiny of their eyes. If she had not been determined to carry on her mission, she would have retreated. But she stood firm, and under the inspiration of her guides, began, "I beg your permission to say that I've developed a very warm affection towards Esther, and have volunteered to take care of her." The couple looked somewhat surprised, but said nothing. After a short pause, the nurse went on, undisturbed by their silence. "I've been caring for her for a month or so now, without detecting any sensible word from her, until... "Until?" Esther's mother asked briskly. "Until a few days ago," the nurse continued. "Esther was extremely weak, but for a brief moment she seemed to recover her faculties and stammered, 'Mother, Mother, where are you? I'm afraid, Mother.' 'Oh, God!' cried the mother in distress. 'Take it easy, my dear,' said the husband, his eyes moist. 'Forgive me if I bring the tears back to your eyes,' said Rosangela. 'I look after Esther as I would a very dear sister. I've compared her to other patients and observed some aspects of the case that most people are unable to see, or perhaps don't want to see.' 'How is that?' interrupted the colonel. 'Please be a little bit more specific and tell us what's actually brought you here. Our daughter is everything we have in this unfortunate life of ours. You're rather too young for me to feel at ease with you. You look too immature and inexperienced, but we're listening. Go ahead.' 'Esther is not insane according to the regular traditional standards of medicine, sir.' 'Yes, we know that,' he agreed. 'Her psychiatrist said that himself.' 'No, it's not that,' the nurse insisted hopefully. 'Listen to me first, please. I say so because I don't consider her mad.' 'What?' 'As I see it, sir,' she proceeded calmly, guided by her spirit friends, 'she's obsessed by evil spirits.' 'We don't understand you, and the illusion sounds absurd to us,' the colonel said significantly. 'Listen to me first,' she asked confidently. 'Death doesn't eliminate life. On the contrary, it expands it. Death is a mere change of appearance within the same reality which is life. Therefore, the death of the physical body does not end the expressions of the spirit individuality, a fact every religion proclaims. Consequently, a natural interchange between those who have crossed the border to the other side of life and those who still remain on this plane is carried on incessantly. Those who have gone into the so-called death world come back from there and manifest themselves in our physical plane, showing the same moral values and personality traits they once had, and the emotional state they were in when death occurred. So, they are happy or unhappy. They come because they are moved by a desire to help, warn or comfort the loved ones they left behind, or just to entertain a few moments' contact with them. Many times they cause disturbances of all kinds, persecuting or obsessing in a constant interchange with those who tune in with their vibrations, just because they are themselves under the pressure of their own persistent passions. 'But this is witchcraft,' interrupted the colonel violently. 'In this house we're traditionally religious people,' he added pointedly. 'We abhor such vulgar practices of fetishism, a thing that unfortunately is affecting our society now. I urge you, please, to change the subject of your conversation. Indeed, I think we have nothing else to talk about.' Rosangela grew pale, while the colonel turned purple with rage. He had lost control of himself, forgetting his good manners. A sad thing, but understandable because many people hide their savage impulses under the thin cover of social polish. 'Tell me something, miss,' he asked rudely. 'What is your religion?' 'I'm a spiritist, sir.' 'Since when has spiritism become a religion?' 'Since its very beginning.' 'You are an insolent and impertinent young lady. To have the nerve to come into my home to harangue about black magic and superstition, as if we were those ignorant people from the inferior social classes that indulge in such psychological miseries as an escape. Such practices should be repressed by the police to begin with. Before you leave this house, please tell me one more thing. Are sorcerers and witches being allowed into hospitals as regular workers now? Darling, please don't get angry, his wife asked tactfully. I must know, he asked vehemently. Tell me, he commanded. Rosangela was perplexed. She did not expect such reaction. She kept a clear mind, though, and she thought, how often is truth ignored for convenience? How powerful is pride, that it separates men according to the amount of money they possess, the position they hold in society, or their physical appearance, and yet they all are marching towards the same direction, this transition called death, which levels up all social differences. Yes, at death our conscience will reveal us, as we are in essence, stripped of all the illusions of earthly life. Inspired, she went on, My dear sir, I came here with the honest purpose to serve, without the slightest shadow of personal interest. My religious convictions have nothing to do with my modest position at the hospital, except in what inspires my Christian attitude towards the wretched ones. It doesn't matter to me whether they're oppressed by poverty or located at the top of the illusions of a temporal material wealth. In the Spiritist group I belong to, Jesus is our model, and the road we propose to follow is named charity. It goes along with faith and is the power of brotherly love. I came to this house on a peaceful mission, and I shall leave in peace, although you have actually driven me away, which I regret not for myself, for I know my limitations. It is said that a cheap pitcher very often carries the pure fresh water that quenches the thirst, while many expensive glasses lie dead and dusty on luxurious, useless shelves. The Santa Marias listened silently, obviously touched by her superior arguments. They seemed unable to stop her, and in fact they were themselves under the influence of spirit entities who had magnetized them so that they would listen. In a semi-trance state, Rosangela continued, the guide speaking through her. May your light shine, warned Christ, so that the world may know you. The light of truth shall glitter, regardless of the efforts of the dark forces to stop it. The burning of witches by intolerance long ago did not silence the voices of truth. They will continue to come until the kingdom of God is definitely established on earth. After a short pause, she said, I shall go on watching over Esther. Nevermore, stormed the colonel, who had managed to break away from the friendly spirit influence. I shall see that you are not allowed to go near my daughter again. I'll report you to your superiors. Do as you please, sir. And with your permission, I'll go. Good day. It was a beautiful, warm day. A soft breeze from the sea swept gently over Atlantic Avenue. Rosangela drew in a deep breath. The fresh air helped her back into reality. Only then, by coordinating her ideas, could she evaluate the incident. She was frightened, and she started to cry. At the Santa Maria's home, she had been an excellent instrument of higher spirit friends who were trying to help in the complex process of Esther's obsession.
Well, that is a very powerful chapter, and as we are discussing what took place, I think it's important for us to always go back to the beginning of every chapter, where the spirit author, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, has always selected a passage from one of Allan Kardec's books. In this particular case, he has selected the commentary from the Spirit's book to question number 525. In question number 525 in the Spirit's books, the question is, do spirits exercise an influence over the events of our lives? And that seems very relevant to what we just heard. And the answer to that question is, assuredly they do, since they give you advice. The next part of the question was, do they exercise this influence in any other way than by means of the thoughts they suggest to us? That is to say, have they any direct action on the course of earthly events? The answer is interesting. It says yes, but their action never oversteps the laws of nature. And Allan Kardec has a commentary in response to that question. And it's important for us to read that one more time, because this doesn't, what we're seeing in this book, and it's important to realize in the commentary, there's very important messages here that we need to understand. The commentary says, once again, we erroneously imagine that the action of spirits can only be manifested by extraordinary phenomena, right? That there's some kind of miracle or magic going on. But this is not the case. All that's done through their help being accomplished by natural means, their intervention usually takes place without us being aware of it. So what's basically being said here is that the spirits are helping us. They're guiding us. They might bring people together who might have been brought together by chance. They might suggest who might seem to have been brought together by chance. They might suggest to the mind of someone the idea of going in a particular direction, or visiting a particular store, or calling someone. They might call your attention to some special point in a dialogue or discussion. They might call you to do something. The important thing is that you're led up to it by their suggestion, which is unperceived by you. But it's important for us to realize that we have free will. We can decide whether to obey this impulse. We can decide whether we wish to follow those suggestions. We can become more aware of the suggestions that are going on in our lives by means of what sorts of choices we choose to make in our daily lives. Through our own free will, we have the power of tuning the frequency, so to speak, towards higher spirits, to higher spirit realms. We have the power to be more connected to sources of help that may actually help us in the way that Rosangela is helped in this text. It's so important to realize the power that the good spirits have played in the ability of Rosangela to calmly, in this particular case, and in a very humble, serene, calm way, in the face of many verbal attacks by the Colonel, she is able to simply say, "Do as you please, sir. But I also would like to tell you about, the fact or the importance of my beliefs that through Spiritism I have grown to understand and be inspired by a Christian attitude." And she explains, in the face of attacks by Colonel Santa Maria, the anger that he had towards finding out that she was a Spiritist, she talks about how Jesus is her model, or our model, and that the road we propose to follow is named charity. It has the power of brotherly love. I came to this house on a peaceful mission, and I shall leave in peace, although you have actually driven me away, which I regret. Not for myself, for I know my limitations. It is said that a cheap pitcher often carries the pure fresh water that quenches the thirst, while many expensive glasses lie dead and dusty on luxurious, useless shelves. And you can see here how the Santa Marias, after the comments that Rosangela made, which, as we look back at that, we can realize how much help she was receiving from the higher spirits there in the suggestions that were being made to her, almost whispering to her how to handle the situation. You can see here in response, despite all the anger that the Colonel had and all the worries that the Colonel's wife had, the Santa Marias listened silently, obviously touched by her superior arguments. They seemed unable to stop her, and in fact they were themselves under the influence of spirit entities who had magnetized them, so they would listen. So you see here, Rosangela was able to bring in the good spirits, not only to help her in communicating with the Santa Marias, but also to help with the Santa Marias even being able to listen to her. So there's several questions that may come into mind here. Since we know that spirits may suggest particular directions to us, they may call our attentions to specific points, they may help us in ways we can't even imagine throughout the day, guiding us towards particular actions or suggestions, or in saying certain things, we might ask, through your actions, through what you're doing in your life, what kind of spirits are you attracting? Remember that spirits suggest and point you to things, and it could be good spirits, it could be not so good spirits. And so you need to think about your own life, think about the model of Jesus, think about how your actions impact you and those around you on both the incarnate and discarnate planes. Spirits can suggest and point you to things, but it's important to realize that we do the actions. Rosangela is doing charitable work at the hospital. She's connecting her own spiritist philosophy, her spiritist understanding of life, and she has connected that to a mission to work in the psychiatric hospital. It's important to realize that the good spirits are pointing, suggesting things to her, asking her to do things, but it's important to realize that you need to do the actions. You need to be the one who is acting and responding to that suggestions. You have the free will to take the suggestions, good or bad, or not. So let's all reflect upon our actions and how they may impact us and impact the way that we're impact not only ourselves and in terms of how we relate to other people, but also how we relate to the spirit realm. There's a couple other things that Rosangela's story teaches us about spirit influence that I think are important to point out. One of them is that after Rosangela leaves the Santa Maria's home and goes out into the street, she breaks down and cries, and it's interesting to think about why that could have happened. Perhaps when she's out in the street, she's not as easily protected by the good spirits. It's hard to say, but the important thing to realize here is that the reality of what just happened to her is very sad, and she may have just kind of experienced the cold reality of the lack of support that she was receiving from the Santa Marias for the type of good work that she feels that she's doing. But we do notice how much the good spirits are helping Rosangela in communicating with the Santa Marias. And so we can see here that their influence is going to continue to help. They're going to continue to help guide her in, and it's possible that she just needs to feel her feelings, to feel the sadness of the situation. And finally, I think it's also important to point out the other side of the coin. We talked a lot about Rosangela, but we haven't talked much about Colonel Santa Maria and his wife. How much, once again, the pride of the Colonel and his steadfast belief that he thought that he knew everything that he knew everything was right, his strict religious beliefs that are blinding him from being able to see the charity that Rosangela and the charity of Rosangela and the amount of compassion she has for his daughter. It's very sad to see him so angry at her, and yet and how much those reactions of pride surprised Rosangela and surprised even the reader with the amount of viciousness that's there. And you have to wonder in the chapter called Spirit Help to what degree we may be also thinking about the fact here that Colonel Santa Maria is also being influenced by spirits, in this case not so good spirits, to make the decision to
lash out at Rosangela. Of course, he followed their suggestions and he had free will to do that. But the reality is that Colonel Santamaria is not influenced to the same extent by the good spirits as Rosangela is, although he was influenced by them when he was listening to Rosangela very intently, despite having been angry. And another important message is when we're doing charitable work. It's a lesson we can learn from Rosangela's experience. When we're doing charitable work, we can't always expect, even if we're doing the right, quote-unquote, right thing, we're following the playbook in terms of doing things charitably, the reality is we can't always help easily. But remember Rosangela when you're doing charity and you feel as if that your charitable action is not being reciprocated by those who are receiving the charity or the family that is involved with the charity. Remember that even though we can't always help easily, the good spirits are there behind us, guiding in ways that we can't even fully understand. And it definitely happened here, and so it's important to remember this incident, which can help guide us in the face of sometimes difficult circumstances where we could say, no one seems to be acknowledging or responding positively to my charitable actions and you want to give up. Remember Rosangela. It's an important lesson we can learn from her. So until next time, when we come back for another chapter of Obsession, remember the importance of charitable actions and reflect upon the experience of Rosangela and how we can learn from her.